So good to see everybody here. As Peter said, we are today in Matthew 19, speaking on the rich young ruler. This is the passage as you open up your Bibles, as I always encourage you to do. These are blue-collar sermons, a.k.a. you're going to have to go to work. Bring your lunch pail, get your pen out, get your highlighter out, your kids' crayons. Let's get in here and start to kind of underline and really just squeeze all the juice out of this passage and get all that we can get. This is the passage that talks about, the camel through the needle eye. This is the passage where Jesus says you have to, how difficult it is for a rich person to get to heaven. And speaking of, I remember when I worked at my previous job, we got a new pay plan, and it rolls out every year. For the whole sales team, you got a new pay plan. And so the first thing you did, if you're a really good salesman, you sat down and you read it, and you just really tried to find the loopholes, and you're like, how do I really, maximize this thing? And so we got one that was a really tough one. And I remember talking with, I can't remember if it was a coworker or my boss, and he's like, our CEO, he says, that passage in the Bible that says rich people won't get to heaven? Well, our CEO will make sure everybody gets to heaven. Get it? I'll let you catch up with that in a second. Who's going to make sure nobody was rich? Therefore, everybody was going to get to heaven. So that being said, we're going to go into Matthew 19. The topic today, or the main point, I try to make it as succinct as possible, but it's really tough to really condense this any more than I could. Here's the idea, is you lack security, or maybe you lack assurance in your salvation when you lack surrender. So you lack security when you lack surrender. But there's no lack of security when we fully surrender. And Jesus addresses both parts of this equation in this passage. Let's dive on in. Matthew 9, starting from verse 16. And we're going to go, as always, verse by verse by verse. Let's break this down. And let's have some fun here. Verse 16. And someone came to him and said, "Teacher, what good thing shall I do so that I may obtain eternal life?" We know from the other Gospels, we'll pause here, we'll go passage by passage, verse by verse. We know from the other Gospels that this man that came to Jesus was described as rich, as young. He was a ruler of a synagogue, so he had some clout in the religious community. And speaking of religion, he was righteous, quote unquote, in the eyes of the law at that time. And so he's living the dream, let's be honest, right? Like they say that, in the beginning of your life, you're young, but you're poor, so you can't really do anything, and you have time, but you don't have any money to use it. And then you don't have any time, and you're rich, and then you finally have time and money, but you're old, right? This guy has it all, though. He has health. He's got some time, perhaps. He's got wealth. He's like in the ideal, like this is what we dream of, right? But he's missing one thing. When he goes to sleep at night, when he wakes up in the mornings, in the moments when he's not busy with everything, when he's studying and trying to perhaps read and go back to the books of Moses, and there's this nagging thought that I don't know if I'm saved. I don't know if I'll spend eternity with God. I mean, I'm doing all of this. And I have some doubts about whether my eternity is secured. And so even if you can't relate to this man because he's richer than you and more successful, however that might be, I really think that at the core, as a human, just man to man, person to person, you can say, maybe I relate to that. Maybe there's folks that are thinking, I'm not sure. How do I have security in my salvation? How am I assured? And so he comes to Christ and he asks the question. And I would say generally the question is right. We can nitpick it and there's issues there. But generally he's asking the right question to the right person. And I believe that he did it with a sincere heart. I don't think he came to Jesus and he was secretly hoping like maybe Jesus can, like really talk me up in front of everybody and say, yes, you're the best, eternal salvation. No, I think Jesus at Mark 10, same story, says Jesus loved him. So I think the question was asked sincerely, and Jesus really wanted to help this guy. And so he comes to Jesus, verse 17, and he said to them, why are you asking me about what is good? There is only one who is good. Pause right here. Jesus is in essence saying, hold on, you're saying, what one good thing can I do, right? And Jesus replies back and says, hold on, you think you can do good. You assume that you can do good. May I remind you, man, that only one is good. It is only God. Your good is like dirty rags. The best day of your life is like garbage because the only good can come from God. I'll make it even more specific, folks. Good deeds, or what we think is good deeds. You can have somebody who is an atheist, for sake of example, and a believer, let's say a true believer, go into a soup kitchen and serve the homeless all day. And one person will be sinning, and the other person will be doing good. Because one person is doing it for his own self, for his own glory, maybe not outspoken, maybe not in a prideful way, but he's doing it to build up his self, while the other person is doing it for God's glory, for God's will, and through God's power. Doing the same thing. And so when we come and say we think, can I do good with my own power? He says, no, you can't. Plus, look at the way the question's asked. He says, why are you asking me about what is good? Underline what. He says the question you should be asking is, who is good? You see that? Underline who. That's the question. It's not about the actions that you do so much as who you do it for and who you do it with. And so he sets the standard here and says, first of all, you want to do good, be like God, in essence. Be like God. But, he continues, if you want to enter life, keep the commandments. And the young man's going to miss this, but what Jesus is saying here, keep the commandments, a.k.a. from beginning to end. All of them. From beginning of your life to the end. Right? We understand that's impossible, but we had a sermon this morning, for those of you that spoke Russian, but I'll summarize. The law was given to show us our incapability of fulfilling the law, of just showing how weak we are, how sinful we are, that there's just no way, if you tried to start today to keep the law, aka Old Testament law, you couldn't. And the only way to get to heaven is to be perfect, to maintain the law and fulfill every single bit of it from when you're born to when you die. And only one person did that, and that was Jesus. You cannot. So he says to the man, he says, keep the commandments. All of them, forever. But the guy doesn't get it. Because in his Jewish mind, he's been taught that you can, in fact, earn your righteousness. That belief system is built on if I do a pretty good job, if I give it the good old college try, just my best, the sacrifices will cover the rest. I can be righteous. My actions can be good. And so when Jesus says keep the commandments, in his mind he's getting like, starting to get some relief. Okay, maybe I'm all right. But Jesus, I still feel anxious about my salvation. Which ones? Let me be clear, he says in verse 18. Which ones? Because you've got the 10 commandments. You guys know them. You've got the 613 commandments of Moses. And then you've got the Mishrach and everything on top of that came from all the rabbis in Babylon, right? So you've got all of these other rules. And so he says, Jesus, I want to be very clear. Which commandments do you want me to keep? Sometimes I wonder, and maybe you guys do too, like if Jesus comes like we have so many, like even Christian branches today, right? Everything from like Catholic and Orthodox to Protestant, and then within the Protestant faiths, we have so many more branches. And then even within, you go down to even our church, and there's folks here that believe different things about different verses, even the way we interpret things. Praise God, we can be united still, and God wants us to stay united. But if Jesus were here, maybe we could do like a theology night and be like, all right, Jesus, how do we really understand this verse? How would you say this, right? So which way should I, is it Calvinism or Arminian? Is it this or that? And so he's saying, Jesus, which ones? I want to be very clear. I'm a rule follower, and I'm going to follow whatever you tell me, Jesus. Give me which commandments. What else? What more do I need to be doing? Continue verse 18, and Jesus said, well, you shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, all these I have kept. What am I still lacking? He's thinking, good. I know these. Oh, these are the first ones I learned. And he hasn't obviously heard the teachings of Jesus up to this point. Because if he had, then what he would have heard, just as we are when we're reading this, when Jesus says, you shall not commit murder, we understand Jesus says, not only murder, it's hate. Hating our brother, hating somebody is like murder in our heart. Some of you guys are serial killers when you get on the highway. You know what I'm talking about. Or a family reunion. He says, you shall not commit adultery. That's lust. Some of us are serial adulterers. He says, you shall not steal. Some of you guys are master thieves. You steal people's time. That's right. Think about that. False testimony, that's called slander. You go through your text messages, and how many times are you talking about somebody, maybe in a way that's not very, very favorable? Right? Honor your father and your mother, and you say, well, I kind of do. And he says, no, not just publicly, but in private, when you talk to them, when you think about them even. Do you honor them in your thoughts, or is it forced? You see, when Jesus talks about commandments in the New Testament, right, we know it's a full transformation. Whereas the Jewish faith was all about show on the outside, Jesus looks into the heart. How many times have we heard Jesus saw the heart? Jesus saw the heart. Just like he's seeing now with the rich young ruler, he's looking into this guy's heart. Jesus wants your transformation completely. Only then can we begin to understand what it means to follow these commandments. And now we're doing it out of love. We're doing it because we love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, strength, everything, right? We're transformed. And so that's what Jesus is calling to here with this verse. But the guy doesn't know that. He's not there yet. He's not reborn. The Spirit doesn't live with him. He doesn't see these truths. So in his mind, he's thinking, whew, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. This is the standard that the world uses today. Listen, you didn't murder anybody. You didn't commit adultery. You didn't steal, right? I mean, yeah, you're a good person. And so the rich young ruler, he can walk away and he can think, I'm a good person. Jesus even said it. Follow the commandments. He pointed out which ones. I think I'm pretty good. But Jesus, why do I still feel doubt? I feel like I'm generally a good person, but something inside of me is not giving me peace. Why can't I know 100% for sure? This is not a game. This is my life. This is my eternal soul. Life is going to be over. I mean, it's just dust in the wind, right? It's just smoke. It'll disappear. I've got to worry about eternity. Why am I still worried? And so he says, all of these I have done. All of these I have done from verse 20, young man, all of these things I have kept. What am I still lacking? And Jesus says in verse 21, if you want to be complete, go and sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. A lack of assurance. a very profound lack of assurance. And now Jesus says there's a lack of surrender. On one hand, you have to admire this man. He, as somebody who has esteem in that community, rich, powerful, young, he dares to openly ask that question. And man, you can only commend him for that. You can say, great work. Like, you found Jesus. You asked the right question. You went face to face, toe to toe with the truth that many of us, let's be very real, or much of the world at least, doesn't even want to ask that question. They don't want to doubt their salvation. I think I'm a good person. I'm all right. And when you begin to ask that question, you guys ever try, maybe with a neighbor or a friend, just dig a little bit, and people get offended. How dare I'm a good person, clutching their pearls. How dare you? And yet he grappled with that question and came to Jesus and says, I have a lack of assurance. I have a lack of security. And Jesus says, I'll tell you why. You have a lack of surrender. Mark 10:21 adds to this quote. He says, looking at him, Jesus showed love to him and said to him, one thing you lack. One thing you lack. One thing. Have you ever had anybody tell you kind of one thing, just a piece of feedback, and it just cut you? And it cut you because you knew it was true. I might have shared this already, but I remember I was maybe 19, maybe 20, working my way through college, selling cars. And we had this office manager who was just this feisty girl, man. She just had a tongue on her. And we always just, clashed a little bit. Nothing crazy, but there was a little tension there. And I'm out trying to sell, and I'm earning a living and moving cars around and getting stuff done. And she's I won't reveal the name for anonymity's sake, but she's in the back doing paperwork. But she's also like looking at reports. She's like, hey, you need to do that, or can you get that car done? And I'm like, listen, I'm trying to do my job and this. And so finally one day she gave me this like retort to something I said. She's like, Pete, you always make excuses. Just do your job. And I was like, that hurts. Do I always make excuses? Is that who I am? Is that my personality, that I'm always making excuses instead of just doing what I'm supposed to do? Is that really what I am? And I'm still thinking about it to this day, right? It's like just boom, it hits you. One thing you lack. Sometimes Pastor Igor, when he reviews our messages, and he'll leave a little note in Google Docs, and he'll say, Pete, one thing you lack. What's the main point? You're like, oh, that's important in a sermon. You got to have that. One thing, but it's the most important ingredient, right? One thing you lack, he says. I love that Jesus doesn't lower the standard. Sometimes you have an employee and they're a stellar employee and you kind of let them get away with things and everybody else is like, come on, like it has to be fair, right? Jesus doesn't do that because he's the star employee. Like, man, I would love to have him as a disciple. He's like, nope, the standard is the standard. The way everybody comes in, the gate is the same for everybody. One thing you lack, no exceptions for you, young man. And he's going to echo this, the call that we just read this morning, Slavic read, and it's echoed in Luke 9:23. He was saying to them, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up the cross daily, and follow me. And he says it to this guy too. No exceptions, no excuses. Hey, guy, you got to deny yourself. You got to take up the cross, and then you follow me. What does it mean to deny yourself and take up the cross? I don't want to go into this. I can speak on this for another hour. But there's an element of humility here, of recognizing where you are and who you are. And I want to share a quote. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's not thinking less of yourself. Oh, woe is me. No, you're just attracting attention to yourself and how pitiful you are. It's thinking of yourself less. I've come across preachers even like at a conference, and they're going to say, don't even put my name on the bulletin. Just say, I'm the poor servant of Christ from this. And I'm like, okay, that's drawing attention to yourself, right? Like you're trying to think of yourself less. Just put your name. That's it. Think of yourself less. Make it easier for other people. Serve other people in their needs. That's humility, not trying to stand out for being so woe is me and pitiful, right? Deny yourself and take up the cross. The man was young, rich, powerful, and legally righteous. 4 points here, right? Look what Jesus, in one sentence, he attacks all 4 of those things. He says, I need you, if you want assurance, you need to surrender. And so, first of all, surrender your riches. Surrender your possessions. Surrender what is near and dear to you. Doesn't have to be riches. Surrender yourself. Sell and give it away. 2, he had power, so Jesus says, I need you to surrender your power. Come be my disciple and my servant, not have other people serve you. Come follow me. Eat the moldy bread that I eat. Wash people's feet. Deal with the sick. Go out on a boat, get seasick on the Sea of Galilee. Come walk in my shoes. Surrender your power. Number 3, he says, surrender your youth. I don't want you in Jerusalem partying up with your buddies. Anybody can do that. Yeah, it's great when you're sitting in the synagogue and comes and all the young men and women are like, oh, look at that guy. Put that away. Come hang out with us. Surrender your youth. Spend it in my company on the dusty streets of Galilee with the sick and poor. And finally, surrender your legal righteousness. Surrender your legal righteousness. Jesus will actually call him out. Because as he asks that question, and it sinks into the soul of this man, you lack one thing. Go and sell your possessions. In that moment, he will realize that he's been asked something that he cannot do. In that moment, he will realize that he's kept all the commandments and forgot the first one. Think back, 10 commandments. Who can tell me what the first commandment is? I don't have a prize for you, but maybe you come up later, I'll give you a hug. First commandment from the 10 commandments. I heard somebody. Love your God, right? And depending on how they break it out, they say also, you shall not have other idols or other gods beside me, right? That's the one he missed. His heart was so attached to his possessions, his power, his youth, everything he had. And he couldn't let it go. It's become an idol. With that one request, Jesus blows the doors open of his self-esteem and shows him, you missed the first commandment. You're not as righteous as you think. You've got an idol sitting inside your heart. There's deep-rooted sin there. And therefore, you can't come follow me. You're not as righteous as you are. Deny yourself. Take up the cross. And then finally, follow me. When Jesus says one thing you lack, it's not about selling the possessions. Selling the possessions was inconsequential in the big picture of things. I mean, there's folks that serve Jesus with their possessions. That's fine. The power, all of that was fine. The issue was that all of that kept him from following Jesus. That's the problem. The one thing he lacked was to surrender himself to Jesus. The possessions were what was keeping him away from that. Right? That was just in the way. Look at Zacchaeus, for example, right? Jesus never came to Zacchaeus and said, one thing you lack, go sell your possessions. Not at all. Zacchaeus, being born again, right? In that moment, he thinks, I know I need to start selling my possessions and giving it out because I want to make up for my past. I want to be closer and more like you, Jesus. The realization just happens. But Jesus doesn't outright call him out on that. And this man, he does because he knows that's what's keeping him from following Jesus. It's addressing the heart of self-focus versus the heart of discipleship. Addressing a heart of self-love and self-centeredness versus a heart of discipleship. One thing, he says, you lack. One thing standing between you and eternity. One thing that stands between eternal life and eternal death. One thing that stands between boundless joy and bottomless despair. Come follow me. Surrender yourself completely. No wonder you have no joy of salvation. No wonder you live with questions. No wonder you have no assurance and no security. You haven't surrendered. One thing. There was a story about a young man that signed up for Ranger School. And as you know, Rangers and SEALs, just incredibly tough training. But this man, he had it. He was tough. His grandpa was a ranger before him. His dad was a ranger. He was born into a military family, and he knew what to expect. And so he goes through ranger school, and he's doing very well, actually. It's incredibly hard. He's one of the last few that's left standing from the class. Usually, they'll bring in a class of like 30, 40 guys, and about midway through, there's like 10 guys left, and by the end, maybe you get a couple. And so he's doing well, and then it's the final test, where they have to dive underwater, and they have to tie certain knots. And they have to tie them correctly in a certain time. And so the guy's timing it, and he goes, and he's trying to tie the knots, and time runs out. He didn't get the right one. He didn't get the last one done. And they say, all right, that's fine. You get 3 attempts at this. Go try again. And so he goes out, he trains, he comes back, takes it again, and he messes up the last one again. And in fact, he wasn't doing quite well on the other ones. He managed to fix them. He just ran out of time. So they said, you got one more try. You're really good at everything else. We've got no issue. You should be able to get it. But you have to get it. Because in Ranger School, if you miss this, that's it. They don't let you retake the course. You don't come back for another semester. You're out. They don't have time to waste on you again and take you through training again. They don't give you a 4th chance. You're out. And so he comes back, he trains, he goes in, gets the first knot, second knot, messes up the third, fourth, and then it cascades, and once again the time runs out. And he's out of Ranger School. All of his lifelong dream in that moment shattered. The trainer tells him afterwards, listen, it was one thing that screwed you up. Fast is slow, slow is fast. You were going too fast, and you messed up. If you had just slowed down a little bit, you wouldn't have made the mistakes, and you would have been completely fine. One thing kept you from fulfilling the thing that you wanted to do all of your life. One thing kept you from having that security. Verse 22, but when the young man heard this statement, he went away grieving, for he was one who owned much property. He wasn't angry with Jesus. He wasn't frustrated. He was sad. You get a sense that he knew that he had been exposed, that what Jesus said was true, that the issue wasn't with Jesus, it was with him. Those of you that have done counseling, you know this story oh so well, especially working with the youth. You work with adults, it's more of the same. When you talk to a young man, perhaps, and you say, hey, bud, you cannot date this girl. You are unequally yoked. She's not good for you. You need to pause this, right? Until either she gets right or you guys both get right. Or a young woman, you say, listen, you cannot continue to date or live this lifestyle or do that. You've got to get it right. And they walk out of that meeting sad. Not because they've repented, but they say, I can't. My heart's attached. I can't not date. I can't not do that. And invariably, 6 months later, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, that relationship wasn't blessed by God, falls apart. People are hurt. And if it's just the two of them, then that's minimal damage. right? Sometimes there's kids, and there's a split, and there's just an issue. And they walk away sad. They hear you. They know they're right, but they can't surrender that part of their life. And it's not just about relationships, and it's not just about money. It's possessions. It's things when people say, "Hey, can you do this?" And you say, "I know I should, but I can't." Can you stop listening to that kind of music? You shouldn't really be watching those kinds of movies. You shouldn't really be living that kind of lifestyle. But I like to party and I like to travel. And they walk away upset. Maybe you'll walk out of this service today upset because the Spirit's going to speak to you. And God is so smart. And the Spirit's smart. He knows He'll speak right into your life about the thing that you shouldn't be doing. And you're going to walk out sad because I can't. I don't want to stop doing it. I don't want to stop doing it. In the same way, the man was in a loving relationship with his money, with his possessions. It wasn't the ruler. He wasn't ruling the riches. The riches were ruling over him. He wasn't ruling the riches ruled him. Folks, Jesus wants to be brutally honest with you. He doesn't want to hide the truth. People that search for His will and come to Him and say, "Lord, I need to be secure in my salvation. I need to know. I need to be assured." And He's going to give you the answer. You keep asking the question, and He's going to be very clear with you. He doesn't want to make you just feel good and give you false assurances, and then you end up in hell. You're like, "Oh, I didn't know." He'll let you know. The question is whether you're going to listen, whether you're going to walk out of there saying, "No, I'll do it," or whether you're going to be sad. You look at Matthew. I mean, Matthew's writing this, and he's like, "Dude, I was in the same spot." He was rich, he was powerful, but when Jesus came by, Matthew 9:9, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in the tax collector's office, and he said to him, "Follow me." Didn't even have to tell him to sell stuff. The guy got up, left everything, boom, disciple of Jesus, different heart, different response. Paul later on would share his testimony of loss. Philippians 3:8. Indeed, he says, "I count everything as loss." And he had a lot. Remember, he was a high-ranking individual in the Jewish society because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For His sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and counted them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. I love to see that heart in born-again believers. Little things, when somebody points out a sin or somebody says, "Listen, you need to surrender this part of your life to Christ," and they say, "Done deal, thank you." Even as simple as this, just recently on the Instagrams, let me give you a positive story. Yeah. A girl decided she's going to post pictures from her vacation, her family, and some of those pictures were swimsuit pictures. And you kind of flip through that, and you're like, "Oh man, like that's a stumbling block for folks." And then later in the day, I'm going through, and there's a post where that's deleted, and there's a note that says, "Hey, some of you guys reached out to me and said that the picture was probably inappropriate, and I took it down. Thank you for letting me know. I don't want to be that to anybody." And I'm like, wow, finally. Because everybody loves to post. Guys, we all look good, right? We've all been working out during COVID, right? It's summertime. We want to post those pictures. Yeah. And we don't have the discipline to surrender that to God and to keep that for yourself and your future spouse or your current spouse. You don't need to post it everywhere. And I was just so impressed. I never see somebody say, "Hey, let me take that down. I don't think this post is appropriate." And she did, and she let folks know and confessed. And I was so impressed by somebody who walked away and said, "I'll do it. Thank you for being brutally honest. Thank you for showing me. I can surrender that." Verse 23, and Jesus said to His disciples, "Truly I say to you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God." I would propose to you that Jesus saw the man walking away, sad. And Jesus also felt that sadness. He offered him and said, "You have two masters. You can serve your possessions. You can serve your idols, whatever it is that the relationships and the actions and the things that you're doing, or you can come serve me. And the man chose that master and says, I'll continue to serve this. I can't surrender that. I can't give it up. And so Jesus turns to his disciples and says, man, it's hard. It's hard. Unless you have a CEO that likes to dock your pay. I kid, of course, but he says it's so hard. Like a camel going through the eye of the needle. And if you've been in church for any amount of time and heard a message on this, so many, right, you've heard the analogy of there's the big door, but then there's the little door by the side of the door. You know, when you go into the city, and at night, that was the eye of the needle, and camels would pass through there, and it was really hard, but you could kind of squeeze them in there. And I would maintain that Jesus meant this literally. And in fact, if you go into old Talmudic texts, you will find that there was an expression in the Jewish society of, they said, the elephant through the eye of the needle. And in fact, when you're really stretching something, like you're telling a tall tale, and you're like really trying to convince somebody, but it's not working, they're going to say, oh yeah, you're trying to put an elephant through the eye of a needle. Not working. Like, that's a stretch, bud. And so Jesus is saying the same thing. He's like, man, it is so hard. It's like putting a camel through the eye of a needle. It's impossible. It's impossible. Jesus' message has always been consistent. And this is just so simple and yet so profound. You look at the eye of the needle. That opening, right, that little eye that you pass the thread through was the smallest possible opening that they could create in that time with that technology. It was the smallest thing that you could still pass something through. And Jesus always talks about the narrow gate. It is so small that only you can pass through there. You have to leave your baggage behind. Your family doesn't sneak in after you. It is only you. It is the narrow gate. You come in, and it's just leave your pride, leave your stuff, leave your idols. It's only you. And then again, he talks about the eye of the needle, that narrow opening. The only thing that goes through there is just a thread, just a single thread. You don't pull in the rest of the jacket through there. No, it's just that single thread. Only one thing, only you. And he repeats it here again. He says, you don't get to bring your possessions with you. That stuff just drags you down. If you're holding on to it and trying to squish through, guess what? You're like that monkey that put its paw into the can of chestnuts, right? And he's trying to yank it out, and he can't. That's how they catch the monkeys. They put and they can't let it out because they want to take it with them. And the only thing that can go through that opening is their hand. That's it. They're caught. And because of their own stubbornness, they don't want to surrender their goods. They're caught. The analogy stares you in the face. Only you. You need one thing. You need to follow Jesus. And the only way you do that is by yourself. One-on-one decision. You leave and you surrender everything behind. Your earnings, your savings, your reputation, your degrees, your family even, your ministry, what you consider good works. It needs to be all surrendered. A lack of security, a lack of assurance in your salvation is directly comes from your lack of surrender to Jesus. A lack of assurance comes from your lack of full surrender to Jesus. Now we get into a second part, and Jesus is about to turn this around and speak to those that do surrender. There's no lack of security when we fully surrender. Yes, you'll have to go through the narrow gate, but what's on the other side? What's on the other side? I'll give this up, but what's over there? Well, verse 25, when the disciples heard this, they were astonished and said, well, then who can be saved? And looking at them, Jesus said to them, with people this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Who can be saved? We begin the second section with the exact same question that we began the first section with, right? First section, the rich young ruler comes and says, what do I do to be saved? It's the question of assurance in salvation, right? Security and salvation. We begin the second section. The disciples now say, well, who can be saved? The same question, and Jesus says, well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what happens on the other side of the narrow gate. Their question is very interesting. It's the idea here is, Jesus, well, everybody has idols. Everybody has something that, we all want to be rich. Every one of us is a future millionaire. We just have to work hard enough. Well, how do I stop those desires in me? We all live with lust and desires, and we're bad at so many things, and yet we desire so many things. What do we do? And Jesus says, well, in the worldly system, yeah, that's not possible. You don't go through the gate. You can't be saved that way with all these things and all of your baggage, trying to drag your security blanket of possessions through. It is impossible for you to be poor enough, because in your heart you're still attached. Even you can be dirt poor and you're still attached to possessions. But God says, I'm going to make you a promise. I can empty you. Oh, I can make you poor. I can make you poor in the spirit. I can make you so poor in your heart. I can make you so detached from your idols that you can possess them yet live like you possess not, as one preacher said. Yes, you can have things. You can be like Zacchaeus and Nicodemus and others who had wealth, and yet they lived like that it wasn't theirs. And then they saw no joy in it. It wasn't what brought them happiness. They completely surrendered it to Jesus. There's a good parenting tip. I can't wait to use it when Tad grows up. But in the meanwhile, for the rest of you, when it's time to buy your kid a car, don't buy them a car. Buy a family car or designate a family car. And then you can say, hey, bud, you can use this. But it's the family car. You can use it. It's yours to use. Clean it. I mean, all of that. But it's the family car. It's my car. It's mom's car. But you can use it. But it's the family's car. The reason they say to do that is studies have shown, they actually experimented this, and they said if you buy the kid a car, they go out, it's like, it's my car, I can do whatever I want with it, and they'll wreck it, they'll ding it, they'll keep it dirty. It's their car. Dad, it's my car, I do what I want. But if it's the family car, they've proven that the kid will actually take care of it. Because now they're accountable. It's the family car. Other people might use it. I might get it taken away. It's not my car. So they still have all that freedom, but then there's also a sense of accountability. It's not mine. It's borrowed. And so Jesus does it the same way. He says you have to have that mindset that what you have, it's the family house. Your stuff, your clothes closet, that's the family's clothes closet. Your 401k, guess what? That's for the family. And then you look down and you pull out your wallet. That credit card, it's the family, except for the debt. That's on you. You pay the debt, but the credit card's for everybody else. And that's the way he wants you to look at everything. Every car I bought in my mind, I was like, this is Jesus' car. And when I wrecked it multiple times, you're like, oh, God gave and God takes away, and I should probably go fix this car. And then when people say, dude, as a kid, I was the one that would always go to the airport 2 hours away in D.C. and pick up people from the airport because this is Jesus' car and he needs it. It's like the donkey that Jesus needs. Go, right? My parents, I saw them living this out with their house. I've always shared the story of how we constantly shared our house with other people. My brother and I sharing our bedroom with a felon for several months. My dad's like, come in. This is Jesus' house. You can live here. Everything you own is not yours. It's surrendered. It's surrendered. That's what happens when you surrender. Verse 27, and Peter responded and said to him, behold, we have left everything and followed you. We've surrendered, Lord. What then will there be for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I say to you, that you who have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. This promise is specifically to the apostles, I believe. They have left their trades behind. You know, every once in a while you'll see them back on the ocean, or on the lake, on the sea. But for the most part, they're following Jesus. They've left families behind for the most part, right? They're coming back still, but they're still taking care of them. But they're spending a lot of time ministering to others. And Jesus makes a special promise to the apostles. He says, you will sit on the 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel, which is kind of an interesting piece, just as a quick aside, that at that time when Jesus was talking about it, well, there were no 12 tribes of Israel. Remember that the northern 10 tribes were wiped out completely. Some 800 years ago, if I remember correctly, before this. And so all that was left was Judah, which had been taken to Babylon and came back and repopulated that whole area, parts of Benjamin, and some of Levi, which doesn't even count as part of the 12 tribes. It's the 13th tribe that belonged to God. And so it's a promise that they will judge, and I believe both the 12 tribes in the past, when there were 12 tribes, right, when everybody stands before the great judgment throne, and in the future, a promise that God will find, those other 10 tribes amongst the people, wherever they are, right, those bloodlines are still there, and they will be brought back, and the disciples will judge Israel in the future. That's for the disciples. What about us? Verse 29, and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms on account of my name will receive many times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. There is a spiritual and there is a physical promise here. The physical promise, the now and today promise. He says, those who forsake everything, those who have surrendered everything to follow Christ, they gain not only security in their salvation, and I'm not saying that if you give everything up, you're saved. Please don't take that away. The idea is you've given everything up to follow Jesus. To follow Jesus is the key part, right? Following Jesus has transformed you to be able to surrender everything. Those people, he says, I will give you security, not only in your eternal salvation, but here now as well. How so? Well, when you become a child of God and you become a part of his church, guys, you become insanely rich. Yes, health, wealth, and prosperity teaching here. Because not only do you own your own car, you own everybody's car. That's right, even my salvage Altima. You can call me up and you can borrow it. You can call me and be like, Pete, I am in need, and as a brother, can you help? And hopefully I can say yes. Pete, can I spend the night? Yeah, I think you can. We can work it out. Hey, Pete, can I? And I can do the same for you. You guys see what's happening here? And he's speaking to, and again, this is the Middle East with Judaism and Roman religions and this new religion, if you will, right? This new faith, the promised, Messiah has come, and he is starting to turn things around, but still there's so much darkness there. And people say, well, if I give up everything, I have nobody to lean on. What do I do if I sell my house, if I give up my car? And he says, no, now the church comes together and we take care of each other. And it's so counter to this American individualism. And it's not only American, it's now just this Western culture that we live in where it's everybody's for themselves. And it's your American dream, and you can make yours. Just know it's a community. We come together, and we take care of our own. And I love it when we do the cleanup in West Sacramento, and Ed Puzenkov blows the horn and sends the text, and 30 pickup trucks roll up. And I'm like, yes, there's the carpool, or it's not the carpool, it's called the motorcade, if you will, that belongs to Jesus. There's all of Jesus's, the trucks that have been surrendered to serve Jesus. And on the other hand, it's also painful when we're organizing an event and we're calling around, hey, can we borrow your chairs, or can we borrow your couch or whatever, and people are saying, oh, no, I don't have time to clean it after you guys. Like, well, yeah, that's true, and we'll try to do better in keeping it clean, but it's also that should be a sacrifice we should easily make. especially for something like this. I mean, when else do you sacrifice something in your house? Do you have people living there? Are you letting people come in and off the street and live? No, we just, it's all for us and us and us. And then when people ask us about things, we're like, no, it's my bone, and growl at them. And Jesus says, you haven't surrendered. Haven't surrendered at all. And no wonder there's questions about whether, am I saved? Am I following Jesus? I'm going to quote A.W. Tozer, who says, the man who has God for his treasure has all things in one. Many ordinary treasures may be denied him, or if he has allowed to have them, the enjoyment of them will be so tempered that they will never be necessary to his happiness. I think that's the key. What you have, your relationships even, right? Not just your possessions, your relationships, the activities that you do, are they absolutely necessary for your happiness? The shows you watch, the music you listen to, is that what makes you happy? Or if he must see them go one after another, he will scarcely feel a sense of loss. Can you just let it go? For having the source of all things, he has in one all satisfaction, all pleasure, all delight. Whatever he may lose, he has actually lost nothing. For he now has it all in one, and he has it purely, legitimately, and forever. That's the physical promise that this verse gives us. I'll end with the spiritual promise. You have eternal life. Those who follow Jesus, leaving everything behind, completely surrendering themselves to Jesus, have eternal life. If you came here today, and you can kind of relate to the rich ruler, and you're thinking, so who can be saved? What do I need to do to be saved? Am I doing what needs to be done to be saved? I don't have assurance. I don't have that security. And the question is, what gives you joy? What is necessary for your joy? What makes you happy today? What's attached to your house? Because even if you lost your home, as Jesus says, your family, your possessions, your relationships, your ability to go do fun things, can you be happy? Can you still find joy in Christ? And the reason I want to point that out even more so today is, folks, it does not take a prophet to see where we're going to, especially in California, but as a nation, guys, we're going to a place where what we preach and teach and what you believe can get you fired. It can get you disowned by your family. It can get you kicked out. That's the reality of what we live in, right? The culture is becoming more and more anti-Christ, right? And so we might be facing a reality, and some folks already are, where you could lose a job. You can lose your business. You could lose your friends. You can lose, even in your family. Christ never promised you an Instagram life. He never promised you a Pinterest life. You know that board. You've clicked it up. Got the perfect body and how to have the perfect house and the perfect kids and how to look good at 20, 30, 40, 50 and how to buy these things and the right investments and the right Bitcoins. Christ never promised you that. This is what Christ promised you. Eric Cooper, a missionary in an African country in West Africa, which they can't even name because the population there is 99.9% Muslim. He shares a testimony. They arrive there and they get to hear this testimony of a Muslim man who had just given his life to Christ 3 months earlier. 3 months earlier, 90 days of walking with Jesus, 90 days of following Jesus. When Jesus said, "Leave everything and follow me," he said yes. Since that time, in the last 90 days, his father-in-law came to his house, forcibly removed and took away his pregnant wife, who he had recently married, the love of his life. This man came and took his wife away and said, I gave her to you when you were Muslim. You're Christian now. You don't deserve her. I'm going to go marry her off to somebody else. He hasn't heard from her since. In the last 90 days, his own mom and his brothers came to his house when he wasn't there, changed the locks, locked him out, took all his stuff, and says, you cannot come back here anymore. You don't deserve this. You're no longer Muslim. He was left with only the clothes, literally, he wore that morning. In the last 90 days, his own brothers said, we're going to kill you. We're going to find an opportunity to stone you as it is by Sharia law. We're going to kill you. We're going to find time. When you're not looking, when you're not ready. So he's waiting for that to happen. And there he was, in a room full of high school kids, preaching about Christ. He says, what else can I do? They've taken everything else away. This is all I have left, and this is all I need. And the next day was a Sunday. They went down to the Indian Ocean, and he was baptized. That's complete surrender. That's complete surrender. He's got nothing else to enjoy but Christ. Whether he had that or not, as painful as that was to lose your wife, your future kid, that's your son or daughter, and he still finds joy and runs to Christ. He doesn't leave following Jesus. He still, I'll follow you. I'll follow you. Our lack of security comes from our lack of surrender. But when we do surrender, there is complete security. I promise you that man does not question whether he's saved. He knows. And he knows that he has the security that Christ has given him, the promise that he will give him many, many times more, whether this in this age or the next. He surrendered it all. We can stand now. As we conclude, I'd like to ask the band to come up. But church, I'd like for you, this is just a personal message, and this is a personal plea. Jesus doesn't go around and just kind of yell out to everybody and says, come follow me. He says it to you individually. And you know if there is one thing or many things that you still need to do, but more so the one thing you should be doing is following Jesus. There might be something that's keeping you from that. What have you not yet surrendered completely? I'd like to call us into prayer. Just come before the Lord and look in your heart and let Him speak to you today. We'll bow our heads and I'll conclude. I'll give you a minute for just silent reflection. Father, we thank you so much for the promise of security that you give to us, the assurance in our salvation that you give to any believer that is born again, that truly chooses to surrender themselves completely to you and follow you. That promise is solid. You do that no matter the loss on our end, because we gain so much more having entered through the narrow gate. I pray for those that are still debating, they're not sure. And that's who you speak to today. And you ask for that complete surrender and to come follow you. It's painful. And if it hasn't been painful, we might have not yet made that decision. We have to let go of the idols in our heart. We're so tied down. This is the country and the place to be tied down with idols. It's so good. And that's why it's so hard for some of us. Lord, let us just bring that to you. What we own, may it be completely yours, so that even as we possess, we live like we possess, not for our pleasure and our own flesh, but that we would deny ourselves and take up the cross to crucify the flesh daily and pursue you and honor you and find joy in you alone. Thank you, Father, for this truth this morning. May your name be praised. Amen.